Starbucks may have put another nail in the coffin of cash after joining up with the mobile payment startup Square. I'm Peter Latman reporting for Business Day Live. Later in the show, I'll be speaking to Liz Alderman in Paris about a French tax proposal aimed at the ultra-rich. And Michael Schmidt will be joining me as we look at a boom in fraud settlements. But first, I'm joined by Quentin Hardy from our technology desk to talk about the partnership between Starbucks and Square. Hi, Quentin.
Hey, Peter, good to be here.
So this is big news for Square. We've been hearing about it for a
fantastic.
couple of years and the whole mobile payments boom. Tell us about this deal.
This is the fantastic news for Square because Square has had, some traction with farm stands or little craft shops, mostly as a credit card processor. This deal with Starbucks puts them nationwide in a known brand and gives them fantastic exposure. Starbucks has its own payment system right now that does $1 million a week. Imagine what kind of cash flow that would be for a small startup.
Okay, so I can walk into my Starbucks now, putting aside Square for a second,
Sure.
I can walk into my Starbucks now with my iPhone, put it under a barcode or something, and they can,
Right.
it's basically having a debit card in my iPhone.
That's about it. Yeah.
How
If you get the Starbucks app, there's a barcode that comes up, you show it to the cashier, it gets scanned, and your latte is debited. But with Square, initially it'll be something like that, but where they're going to go with it is fantastic. The idea is to have a GPS system, a global monitoring system that says when you enter the store, and your picture and name will pop up on the cash register. And you come up to the cash register, you make your order, and you just say your name, and your picture's there, and that way they verify it's you, and they hand you your coffee, and you're done.
And if your coffee of choice is a grande vanilla skim latte, will they have that in the system too?
I think that will be over time. They'll start to figure out your preferences and try and sell things against it, but that's the nature of the modern world, right?
Right. Now Starbucks is going to put some skin in the game here. Not only are they using the app, and
They are
they're
giving the money,
investing.
and Starbucks CEO is taking a seat on the board. And he's a smart guy, and he will help them market this very well.
Now, you're suggesting that by getting a huge national retailer like Starbucks to use Square, that this could have a ripple effect across the retail landscape.
Sure, you can see that kind of thing. A bakery nearby might suddenly be interested in having Square because there's a Starbucks that has it. And over time, Square promises that it will also identify other businesses in the area, businesses that use Square. And you'd be drawn to those naturally. So that creates an incentive on both sides to build out the system.
Are we overstating it, saying this is another nail in the coffin of, a cashless society?
I'm still
I
kind
barely
of partial to money. I think money is fine, money is great, but there are other methods that will come along. Everything changes, everything adapts, and there is a kind of pervasive awareness of who we are, where we are, and what our credit rating is. So why shouldn't this have a place in the market?
And why didn't, I was thinking, why didn't American Express or MasterCard or Visa, why weren't they all over this? Why do you need Square, which, as you told me, is founded by Jack Dorsey, who also founded Twitter.
Right.
Who is this guy?
He's a busy guy. How does he knock out, two of the biggest, most flexible giants? American Express is in there too. They're all trying. But, it's so much harder to move into a new world if you have an existing business you're trying to keep running. Square came up assuming this kind of a world, no baggage, no history, and they just move a little faster. They're a little more flexible.
And as the article points out, Square is already worth $3.25 billion.
Which is a lot of money, right?
Yeah, it is. Well, thanks for coming on, Quentin.
Whatever form of money it is, it's a lot of money.
Well put. We're looking now to Europe. France is considering a tax proposal that would raise the marginal tax rate to more than 75% on income of more than 1 million euros. That has some wealthy people considering a change of citizenship. Liz Alderman is on the line from Paris, and she joins me now. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Peter.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. So I guess you're sitting put in France with your journalist salary, but it sounds like some wealthy French people out there are considering moving across the border because of this proposed tax. Tell us what's happening there.
This is, ever since Francois Hollande was on the campaign trail, one of the things that he talked about in order to distinguish himself from the previous president was basically taxing the rich more. And now that he's in, the idea is to, as you say, put a 75% income tax on anybody earning over $1 million a year in a bid to help balance France's budget. He needs to find about 33 billion euros worth of savings for next year. But the issue really goes to the heart of sort of a cultural divide in France, as well as a big income divide. And it basically, his philosophy is that, if you're that wealthy, you should most certainly pay more, but much, much more. What in a way that many people are seeing is really a penalty against entrepreneurship. Many people are concerned that this is something that could blow back against businesses in France, and a lot of people, according to accountants, lawyers, and number of other people I've spoken with, have said that people are thinking about whether they should be making a move now outside of France's borders.
Right, and just to understand the tax as it's proposed, so this would be a 75% tax on all income above 1 million euros. So from 0 to 1 million euros, there's a different tax rate in place, and then above a million, that's when you get to the 75%?
That's exactly right.
Right, and your reporting, you spoke to a ton of real estate agents and various other lawyers who advise wealthy people in France, and it really does sound like there's some critical mass of wealthy people who are considering a move, and you've already identified a few bold-faced names that have moved across the border.
Yes, I mean, again, it's the people who are thinking about, first of all, it's not necessarily new for wealthy people to leave France. Under the last socialist president, Francois Mitterrand, many wealthy people left France when he put, in place what many people saw as really sort of onerous taxes on the wealthy. And what Francois Hollande is proposing to do today is really, it's very symbolic in a way, because there are not that many people in France who actually make that much money. In any case, for example, if you are the CEO of a big French company, it's going to be very difficult for you to actually pick up your entire family and leave. What this really comes down to, though, is a kind of a black eye for the image of France as a place to do business, on top of, already businesses paying very high corporate taxes, a very rigid labor system and everything here. This is not something that is seen as not good for the image of brand France.
Right, and you mentioned it has a symbolic gesture to it, because after all, the amount of tax that will be generated here will not be enough to offset the amount of money they need to raise. And I guess there's a lot of social and welfare items that are going to be drastically cut. So this will be sort of a symbolic move by the president to assuage people who might be angry at the various cuts that might be taking place.
I mean, it is certainly something that got, Francois Hollande a huge number of votes during the campaign. And, again, it really goes to this issue that has been besieging France for really as long as anybody can remember. And what that is just simply the fact that there is a huge wealth divide in this country that is getting even larger, especially as the swirling European economic crisis continues to buffet France's shores.
Well, thanks a lot for coming on today, Liz.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
Finally, we're turning back to the U.S. Last year, the Justice Department earned a record sum in penalties from fraud cases. But what's been missing in many of those cases is charges against executives. That has people scratching their heads, and Michael Schmidt has been following this story. He joins me now. Hi, Michael.
How are you?
Good story today, and I think what you've identified is a tension here. The Justice Department has had tremendous success over the past year in exacting penalties from companies in the billions upon billions of dollars. But at the same time, there's still public dissatisfaction that no individual executives, or not many individual executives, have been brought to justice. Tell us about that tension.
Well, the federal government's been bringing in billions of dollars from these companies, from big pharmaceutical companies, from big military contractors, from all different types of major corporations. But at the same time, they're able to get $3 billion from GlaxoSmithKline, but they're not able to bring any prosecutions in that. And there's a certain anger that I've seen certainly in reader email that I've gotten since the story went up, and the people I talked to before, that is sort of left over from the financial crisis, and people don't understand why many executives haven't been prosecuted. And if the government's having so much success financially getting money from them, why is it that none of these executives who the behavior alleged against them is pretty egregious, but there's just no prosecutions.
Right, and your story mentions a case that I covered last week against Citigroup involving mortgage securities, and it was fascinating because it was a civil prosecution of an executive there, a low-level executive, who was cleared of any wrongdoing by the jury, but the jury issued a note alongside of its verdict saying this should not dissuade the government from pursuing continuing, criminal conduct related to the financial crisis. Tell us about that.
Well, as much as people really want the government to go after people, the government runs into an obstacle, and that obstacle is the criminal system and the civil system. They tend to shy away from the criminal system because the burden of proof is far higher. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. And in a civil case, it's the preponderance of the evidence. And that's what kind of made the case that you're talking about interesting, is that even in a civil case where it should have been easier, they still weren't able to get a conviction. So, the government is very afraid of losing. They're very afraid of losing money. And, they figure this is probably an easier and more efficient way to go after companies.
And do you think that from the company's perspective, whether they're advised by their outside lawyers or in-house counsel, that they really do think of this as the cost of doing business? I mean, these are healthy penalties after all, whether it's the healthcare fines that you've mentioned or military contractor cases. The government is sort of extracting its pound of flesh here. But is there a certain cynicism to say, the companies just, they pass it on to the shareholders, this isn't a big deal for them?
It seems like the companies are making massive amount of profits from this behavior, and the penalties that they pay are less than the profits. So if you're an executive and you're thinking, well, I'm not going to be prosecuted criminally about this, and we'll probably still make money on this, why don't we just take the risk and, and see what we can get away with, and then if we lose, we'll settle up with the government. And this is what some critics in Washington are saying, is that for executives, there's no reason, to take a risk, and the thing that they see with these cases is companies that are getting into trouble time after time after time, year after year. It's the same companies, it's the same pharmaceutical companies that are running into these issues, and people are saying, well, this is just kind of a tax that shareholders pay.
And it's also good for the lawyers, right?
Yeah, I guess the legal fees may eat you up.
Thanks for coming on, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today. Please follow us at nytimes.com for a continuing coverage of these and other stories. I'm Peter Latman, reporting for Business Day Live. Thanks for watching.